Hello and welcome to Advocacy Insights. We're here with Doug Farquhar, our Director of Environmental Health, and specifically our Government Affairs Division. We wanted to welcome you. My name is Brandy Rome, and I am happy to give you just a little insight of some things that NEHA is doing in regards to this that Doug will go into greater detail. We have a wonderful resource on our website at neha.org that is our private water network. We also have an article from the Observer that our director, Dr. David Dijak, has put out about PFAS. And we also have some private drinking water resources there for you. I'm going to kick it over to Doug to get us started on this session of Advocacy Insights.
Brandy, thank you very much. Are you going to do the slides or should I?
Please, Doug, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I need to once I get my permission going, we'll start moving forward on the slides. This is something that's we've got a real difficult month going on here, to say the least. This has been a real challenging month with everything going on in Washington with the new administration, and it's something that we have to figure out the best way to address. And I'm going to quietly ask Brandy, can you see my slides? Can you give me a yes?
Yes, Doug, we can see those.
Okay. First of all, I want to emphasize, and I really want everybody to take this to heart, is that environmental health is a state and local issue. It is not a federal issue. Many of you have told me that you get no more than 5 to 10% of your budgets from the federal government. That seems to be fairly universal across the board. This does not mean that the federal government doesn't have a role to play. It just means that most of the work that is done, food safety, body art, water, wastewater, recreational water, our big ticket items, are done via local funding, local taxes, local fees, not from the federal government. So the important thing I want to really bring up here, though, is that even though we got a lot of chaos going on in DC, we still should be able to meet the mission and the purpose of what we need to do every day. So it's we really do need to kind of keep that going. We're not in a situation where our programming, for the most part, is reliant on federal funding or grants, which are very much in the up the air right now. Now, if we look at where Congress is, when you looked at past presidential administrations when they've taken over, you look at Obama in 2008, you look at Trump in 2016, you look at Biden in 2020, they didn't have the challenges that the current administration has right now. What I mean by that is they had passed their budget for the fiscal year. They didn't have to worry about the debt ceiling immediately. They were kind of going in with several members on their side. Trump in 2016 had close to 50 Republicans, a 50-member advantage in the House. This time, it's much tougher. What Congress is facing right now, what the administration is facing right now, is the fact that we don't have a fiscal year 2025 budget passed. We haven't even begun discussing the fiscal year 2026 budget, which is going to start in October. We haven't been able to pass the big, beautiful bill, which is going to cover all of Trump's agenda, which needs to be to his desk by April 3rd, or at least that's what he has requested. We have a continuing resolution coming up in March 14th. After that, the government shuts down. that puts all the pressure back on Congress to reopen it, to make sure we have enough money to make sure that we can run the programs that we have identified for fiscal year 25. And from what I can understand, the Democrats aren't being very helpful to the Republicans. They aren't coming, they're making some strong demands to get their votes. They're making some strong demands, requests for the Trump administration to stop the DOGE, to stop the elimination and the removal of federal employees, to implement the programs that they've already have agreed to, and not to impound those programs. So there's a huge difficulty going on out there. This is much more strenuous, much more challenging than it has been in the past, much more challenging than what Biden faced, than what Obama faced, and what Trump faced when they took over. Now, when Obama came in and he had all these successes in Congress, it was individual bills. He passed a bill to deal with student loans. He passed a bill to deal with childcare. He passed a bill to deal with Obamacare. Each one of these were done individually, and most of them he got done in the first 6 months, the honeymoon, the first 100 days that you often hear about. When Trump took over in 2016, the only thing he passed was the tax breaks. The only thing he could get through Congress at that time was the tax breaks. This time, he's asking for much more. Last time, he didn't get the border wall built. He did not get, Mexico didn't pay for it. This time, he's trying to get the same thing done, but he only has a 2 to 3 vote majority. Last time, he had a 50 vote majority. This time, he only has 2 or 3 votes. It's going to be really tight. That's the reason they want to dump everything into one bill, pass it through reconciliation where they only need to have a simple majority in the Senate, and get it to the president's desk. Nothing like that has ever happened in this time frame. Never been able to get it done by April 3rd. It's always taken longer than that. However, Republicans don't have a lot of opportunity because they need to get this thing done before they start getting sucked into trying to deal with the fiscal year 26 budget, debt ceilings, other issues that are occurring, and other things we don't even know about. Are we going to have another hurricane? Are we going to have another flood event? Are we going to have avian flu? All this stuff is really putting pressure on them. Ultimately, they may need Democratic votes to get their agenda passed. Any Republican that says, I'm against this, they're going to need a Democrat to say we're for it. So it's going to be a really challenging next few months for Congress, the Republicans in Congress, and the administration. Reconciliation. This is what we've been chatting about, and you're hearing about it. Right now, the Senate's going through the vote-a-rama. What that means is that they came up with a budget numbers that came out from the Republicans, and now they're going through the process where both sides can add and amend, and they vote to it, and they talk about stuff. Basically, everything's going along party lines. If the Democrats bring it up, the Republicans shut it down. If the Republicans bring it up, the Democrats shut it down. But it still is going through this vote-a-rama. What it's going to try to do is ultimately come up with a high set of numbers that is going to be the budget for fiscal year 25. The House is coming up with a different set of numbers. They're coming up with a set of numbers that's going to require cutting certain programs out there. Same thing with the Senate, but they're focused on a different set of numbers. That means that they're going to have to come to some sort of agreement. Right now, the Senate is looking at about a $300 billion cut. The House is looking closer to a $1 trillion cut. Where that's going to come from is hard to say, in the sense that if you do it, you're going to have to go to some programs that are very popular among constituents. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. You may have to cut back on defense. Department of Agriculture. Right now, farmers are getting between 40 and $60 billion. You cut that back, that's going to be devastating to the farm economy. Transportation, roads, bridges. You want to cut that? Well, that's going to have an impact too. So they don't have a lot of wiggle room. Comes to environmental health, we are small potatoes. If you take the entire EPA and the entire CDC budget under Biden numbers, that's less than the amount that they're talking about to fund the difference in the USDA budget between 80 to $100 billion there. They have huge amounts of money going back and forth when you deal with transportation, when you deal with defense. When it comes to our issues, we're very small. We're not going to have an impact one way or the other. That makes us both positive and negative for us. So let's talk about where things are really important. The states. States are getting things done. When you start talking about what goes on in environmental health, it's the states that are getting these things passed. If you want to see what's going on body art, federal government doesn't even have a body art law. FDA doesn't even regulate tattoo inks. Who does? It's the states. Who takes care of recreational waters? The states. Who takes care of most of what goes on food safety, mobile food trucks, food carts, food freedom? That's all happening in the states. It's not happening in the federal government. If you look at this map, one of the things I want to highlight is the fact that most states are one party. We're dealing with one party states. What that means is the House, their Senate, and the governor are all of the same party. Now, we have seen after the last set of election that we did see things get a little bit more diverse. Minnesota now has a split legislature. Pennsylvania has a split legislature. Many of them, Kentucky has a Republican legislature, Democratic governor. We're seeing that in Kansas as well. Republican legislature, Democratic governor. So things are split out there. So there's not as much uniform, but for the most part, most states are one party. The trick is the governor doesn't like the speaker doesn't like the Senate president, and the Senate president doesn't like either the governor or the speaker. They all three have their agendas that they want to get across. So how do you get uniformity out there and get things passed? When you compare what Congress has passed during the 118th congressional session, the last one, versus what the states have, the states generally pass around 30 to 40,000 bills every legislative sessions. Congress passed less than 100, and most of them dealt with the renaming of post offices. They don't get a heck of a lot done in Congress. Nothing of significance passed during the 118th Congress. Whereas in the states, we did get significant bills introduced, discussed, and passed. And we're seeing things move forward. So when it comes to what happened in 2024, I want to just talk to you a little bit about what happened with drinking water legislation. 51 bills regarding drinking water and public health were enacted in the 50 states. These dealt with the Safe Drinking Water Act, the revolving funds, private well, lead hazards, PFAS. Congress didn't deal with PFAS. It was the states that came down with that addressed it. I'm just going to highlight a few things because we don't have a lot of time today. But when it comes to the Safe Drinking Water Act, we saw issues occur in California, Utah, and New Jersey. The thing I want to highlight here is the efforts we're seeing going on in California regarding water and water quality across the state. They are dealing with some significant problems on trying to keep the taps running in their state, meaning they are trying to make sure that there's an adequate number of water, that there's water flowing to the taps, that it's safe, that it doesn't have PFAS, that it doesn't have contaminations from lead, that it doesn't have all these problems that we are seeing out there. There are parts of California that went dry in the past few years. That means they need a wholesale restructuring of how the locals provide water. And what they did a couple of sessions ago, is place a mandate out there that the local cannot provide water. They have to merge with another water district that can, and making for larger districts so they have the ability to provide adequate and safe water. And you've seen with the recent fires, they didn't have enough pressure in the pipes to put the fires out. This is having to do with adequacy of water. These are things that the state is dealing with constantly, but they want to make sure that it's meeting safe drinking water standards. So that's been a huge thing that they're trying to deal with there. Revolving funds. When Trump was president back in 2016, the one program at EPA he supported was the revolving funds. This is a pretty smart bill out there, pretty smart policy that's done by the federal government, where EPA provides states money to deal with drinking water. The state can take that money, loan it out to the locals. They can take the interest from that and use it for other things. So it's building up a pot of dollars out there that states can use for drinking water. Colorado is taking that and looking at the list of projects that they could do. When I say drinking water, it's a real broad source. Can you deal with other aspects of drinking water? Can you deal with groundwater? Can you deal with other EPA is pretty broad on that. It's the states that have been figuring out how they want to define it. Hawaii, talking about the drinking water loan capitalization, to build that up, to make it larger. Land acquisition in Nebraska. New Mexico, authorizing the state finance authority to make loans or grants for state water projects under the revolving funds. South Dakota has addressed this. Utah has addressed this. The revolving funds are a very powerful tool for the states to use to address drinking water. It is defined not by the federal level, but it's barely being defined by the state legislatures. So that is where you're really seeing the dynamics that are going on to deal with the drinking water revolving funds. These are all bills that passed in 2024. What are we seeing in 2025? Well, already I've been able to identify 394 bills introduced in every state. Every state legislature is in session this year. We are seeing what I've counted so far, and these are my numbers, meaning I'm going through and there's certain things that I'm going to be looking for on food safety, on body art, on drinking water, on indoor air quality, on wastewater, on credentialing. But these are, my terms, but I think I'm trying to capture as much as I can. So far, I've seen 226 bills in the 50 states on food safety. 28 of them deal with food freedom. I've got 9 out there on micro enterprise kitchens. Another issue that I'm seeing out there that I haven't seen in the past is food additives. Several states are introducing legislation to say certain food additives are prohibited into retail food, into school lunches, into other aspects. So they're starting, that's a new issue we hadn't seen in the past. Body art, I've seen 33 bills on that in the 50 states. It's a wide variety out there, but the states that have the most number of bills looking at this, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey. Drinking water, again, we know that PFAS is going to remain a big issue. That's where the action is in the revolving funds. Again, like I said, it's the legislature that makes the determination of that. Legislatures are doing more and more activities on those levels. Regarding indoor air quality, Illinois, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Wisconsin, they have the most activity out there regarding indoor air quality. I believe I saw a bill this time around in North Carolina on carbon monoxide detectors. We're seeing a lot out there on lead, lead in schools, lead at homes. We're also seeing quite a bit out there on trying to deal with the lead in pipes issues. Wisconsin I was working with them on the lead in pipe issue. What they were trying to get to is how do you replace lead water pipes in a conservative manner? What I mean by that is the Republicans in the legislature, they want to remove it, but they want to do it in a manner that's going to be true to the conservative nature, which means they're not going to force mandates. They're going to give people, local governments, the ability to do this in a manner that they want to, but they want to give them incentives that they actually will start engaging in this process. Other bills, food freedom. Food freedom is an enormously popular subject. Republicans and Democrats both like this issue. It provides entrepreneurs an ability to get their foods out there. It allows for a small manufacturer, or really just a single person, to be able to make tamales, to be able to make burritos, to be able to cook donuts, cookies, whatever the case may be, and sell it out of there. Sell it out of a mobile food truck, sell it out of something that's very convenient. But it also means that that it's going to create possibilities for food safety and foodborne outbreaks. And it also limits the ability of state and local governments to oversee these operations. Colorado, which has a Republican House, Senate, and a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic far liberal leaning governor, they have really passed some very proactive, very permissive food safety, food freedom laws, allowing for meats to be sold directly from the rancher to consumer. Some of the people at the Department of Health came to the governor and said, could we at least refrigerate that? Before they do that, he says, okay, I'll be open to do that. So we have a bill that's going to allow for cottage foods and unregulated foods to be refrigerated. Illinois, I found this interesting. They are going to create a Food Truck Freedom Act to allow food trucks to be selling unregulated food and food coming from unregulated kitchens. Indiana, this is really interesting. Indiana is actually going against the tide. This is something that's going to make food freedom more restrictive and less permissive. It is going to require that a small farm or home-based vendor to complete and pass a food safety training before being able to sell time temperature control for safety for homemade food products. They're going to have to get trained and learn what they're doing. That's being more more restrictive. On the other hand, you got Mississippi out there creating, on-farm sales and a Food Freedom Act expanding it to allow more entrepreneurs out there, more businesses to sell unregulated foods. New Hampshire. Don't know if anybody on the call's from New Hampshire, but they are really expanding their Homestead Food Production Act. They're allowing for meats to be sold. They want to be able to sell freeze-dried meats there. They want to also allow the number of food production in a food production area. So they are really expanding what they do, their homestead food production program. Oklahoma, they want to expand cottage food sales to gross sales of up to $300,000. They also want to allow for the sale of raw milk out there. Or, Tennessee, they want to expand their homemade food products to include poultry, meats, dairy. Texas, I was just there the other day, in fact, yesterday, talking with Senator Colquist's office at the Senate Health Committee to talk about what we're going to be able to live with the folks from Texas Environmental Health Association, and their concern is not food safety. Their concern is they want to allow people to be able to sell food. They want to give people the opportunity to make their product and get it to market and get people out there so they can build it up big enough that they can actually have a legitimate operation. So when we said, well, we're okay with that, but could you at least have the time temperature controls on there? Can we have certain food safety protections out there? Yes, they were very open to that. So it looks like we're going to get a bill that's going to be not great for environmental health, but better. for environmental health. Food freedom is moving forward across this country. Microenterprise kitchens. Several states are allowing for that. That will allow a person to be able to make a retail food product in their own personal kitchen. What kind of response is the local government going to be able to have? Well, that's varies on the state. California, you have to be inspected before you can open up. In some other states like Missouri, they want to repeal all sorts of inspection, also oversight. You'll be able to do whatever you want to in your home-based business. New Hampshire, several bills here trying to expand food production, as we talked about. Even New York wants to look at a study on how well you can make these home-based kitchens work. They're calling them kitchen incubators. Should the state go ahead and allow that or not? Well, they're going to take a look at this. This is very popular item to try to start allowing people to do more micro enterprise kitchens. Finally, what are going to be our priorities? We're going to fight for you. We're going to fight for the budgets at FDA, for the budgets at CDC to protect environmental health, that address food safety, that address the issues that are going to be of most concern to the environmental health workforce. We're going to continue to work with Congress and work with the administration to try to expand workforce capabilities to make it easier for you to hire and retain environmental health staff. This is not going to be an easy go-around. This is a very difficult Congress to deal with. We have the administration trying to push a lot through. But we're going to know basically in the next couple of months how successful they'll be. Last time when Trump was in office, he wasn't very successful. He didn't get a lot of his agenda passed. He's trying a new approach this time. Let's see. We'll have to see how well his big, beautiful bill works and if it actually can get through or not. Lots of stuff happening in the states, lots of stuff happening in the locals. All these things will make your life either better or worse, but in bottom line, it'll at least make them interesting. With that, that is Advocacy Update for February, and I look forward to any questions that anybody has.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was a lot of information, a lot of food for thought, and so grateful for those insights. We have posted links in the chat for the Water Network. Another feature of that, there are fact sheets on our website for wildfires, floods, droughts, a lot of the items that we were talking about. It looks like we had kind of a question comment from Sue Dempsey saying that the SRF in many states has plenty of money, but water systems often don't take the money because they can't afford the loans back. Even with zero interest, they don't have the tax base. Doug, do you have any thoughts on that?
My thoughts are very unsympathetic, which is a real problem. Because yeah, it's always hard. There's no one out there has a solid tax base. Everything costs something to go forward out there. The reason that states cannot declare bankruptcy, that agencies can't declare bankruptcy, is you can always raise taxes. You may not like doing it, but you can do it. And if you take a look at what goes on out there and how much water costs, water in general costs from the tap about 3 cents a gallon. If you raise it to 4 cents a gallon, that's a 25% increase to your budget right there. Therefore, no one is really going to give you a lot of sympathy out there about saying we don't have a solid tax base on this, because because people do purchase water, lots of water, bottled water, and it's much, much more than 3 cents a gallon. So it's a little bit of a disingenuous argument, even though I know if you go to your consumers, they will not say that they have money floating around for additional water. Problem is, water is one of those essential items that I don't think you can negotiate. So I'm sorry that wasn't probably the answer you were looking for, but that's my rough, cynical point of view.
That's great. We appreciate your perspective, Doug. We have a couple more questions in the chat. Another one is from Heather. In Washington, the money gets allocated for larger systems. So smaller systems, 3 to 14 connections, have no access to revolving funding and monies.
Yeah.
Is that something you see, Doug?
Yeah, well, and this is just the inherent problem when you got a smaller system. And in most states, you have like one or two big systems which dominate like 40 to 50 to 60% of all the users in the state. And that means that the smaller ones just really don't have the infrastructure to apply for grants, to meet the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act, to upgrade their systems. What we're seeing coming down from EPA is what we saw in California and what we're seeing in Kentucky. They're putting pressure on the smaller systems to consolidate. So you actually can all get together, pool your resources, and provide these services. Because otherwise, like you said, when you've got 15 connections, when you got less than 50, when you got less than 100 connections, you don't have the capital, you don't have the base, you don't have the resources to have a program that's going to meet all these requirements, including the state revolving funds, which is a shame because in some states like New Mexico has done a really good job of really focusing on their rural communities to make sure they're eligible and they can use these funds to expand their system and bring them up to date and maintain their systems. But there's not a lot of help out there when you got a small system outside a demand to consolidate.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate your input there. We've got one more. It looks like time for a couple more questions. We have, hello, Doug, Danny from Dripping Springs. Thanks for
Hi,
the
Danny.
insight.
Danny Gonzalez. Good to see you from you.
Thanks for the shout out. So it looks like the trend around the US, not only Texas, for cottage foods and TCS foods and raw milk being sold. My question is, do these senators and reps look at science and data to make these choices or not?
Yeah, they do, but it's tough for them. And we have to give some sympathy to these state lawmakers because they come in, they may have a background in food safety or selling something, and they're put on the banking committee. It's not necessary that they really have the information. This is the big thing that I really want to harp on every affiliate is because they will learn about the science if you tell them. They need to hear from you because otherwise they're just going to hear from the business industry. They're going to hear constituents who say, my local health department's the one that prevented me from selling my oysters on the sidewalk there. And it's perfect. I wouldn't sell oysters that poison people. Well, you don't know that, obviously. From a legislator's point of view, they're going to gather the data that they get and make an intelligent decision based on that. If the affiliates get out there, you make tremendous inroads by letting them know what you know, to letting them know why you think it's a problem, and also saying, well, let's work on this. We can make a better bill. And I really think that's what we did yesterday in Texas, is we made a better food freedom bill than what was originally going forward.
So smart, Doug. Education is key, and being able to share those insights from experts like your community is so important. Doug, we're pretty much wrapped up here for this session. But if anyone would like to ask further questions, feel free to reach out to Doug, and I will be posting his email and information in the chat. And thank you so much for joining us for Advocacy Insights.
We will be meeting again next month third Thursday, 3 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Mountain Time. Looking forward to talking to folks then.
See you then.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy. Take care.